Hey everyone, how's it going? So welcome to episode 2 of Reel Up My Ride, and thank you so much for the response to episode 1 as well. I'm absolutely blown away by it. I had no idea that you guys wanted to see that content or that it was going to be so popular. So if you liked, commented and subscribed off the back of that, thank you so much. I really do mean that from the bottom of my heart. And if you're not familiar with the idea of this series, then I take all of your blueprints and your parks that you've submitted to me, and then I inject some realism to them. And I do that by using a combination of what's playable in Planet Coaster and also my experience of working for a theme park company alongside all of those who design parks in real life. And so I'll pop some details on how to submit your creations in the description below. But here we are with episode 2, so let's go ahead and check out the park. So today's park is submitted by Tom Burbabge. Tom, thank you so much for this submission. It's a park called Avonturenpark Hellenburbs, and I'm sorry if I've just butchered that with my English accent. And so chatting with Tom before we started this episode, there's a couple of inspiration parks that are going into this. So you're looking at Efteling, you're looking at Alton Towers, and you're also looking at Liseberg as well. And when I was doing all of my tour of the area, I was also getting feels for Wallaby Holland, in the sense that you've got the entrance plaza with a ride sitting at the end, and then your park sprays off outside of that. So that's kind of what they do at Wallaby with the Ferris wheel, right? So it's getting the same sort of vibes. And you're also using very distinct, very obvious themed areas that are nestled in their own right. And this is kind of like borrowing from both Alton Towers and Gardaland as well. So you've got your pirate area, your medieval area, your western area. You've got a loosely themed flying area at the bottom. You've got the temple area with your rapids, and you've also got the sci-fi area at the top here that's under construction. And so you're using very distinctive areas. Your dark rides are very much well placed in the park, so they're sort of surrounded by vegetation, foliage, and they're quite well hidden. And you're using guest sightlines quite well in the sense of you're only designing really what your guests are seeing. And so that's a good start. If we were to do any kind of reeling up of these rides, we'd be looking at things like escape points, maintenance areas, plaza areas, monetization of the area and everything like that. But our episode is going to focus mainly over here, and this is where we really do start to borrow very heavily from Gardaland. And the area that I'm thinking of is around the Jungle Rapids, Fuga de la Lantida, and also Sari as well, for reasons that I'm about to go into. So within this temple area, you've got this absolutely awesome rapids ride. So it's a really, really well thought out, well put together layout. It just needs a little bit of work to bring it to life. So we just need to integrate the theme a little bit more. And we also need to start thinking about the functional, practical stuff. So things like maintenance areas, we need some kind of water treatment plant, we need escape points, we need access points via road and everything. So, but we also need to be mindful of the theme and how we're going to hide those. So they need to be there, but they need to be hidden. You've also got this Intamin coaster as well that you're seeing through the hills, so the same one that you'd find at Hershey Park. I won't do much to the actual coaster itself. I want to remain loyal to the layout that you've designed. You've designed it with purpose. You've designed it to be like this for a reason, so it's not my place to change it. It's not my place to do anything with it. About all I would do would be to reprofile some of the bends just to give it some heart lining. That would be it. You've also got this screaming swing that's sitting on the top of the hill, and this is a great thing from Liseberg. This is something that they do really, really well. Very dominating in the area. It's very obvious. You can see it from quite far around. We're going to need to do some work with this one for reasons that I'm about to share with you. But you've also got this little flat ride down the bottom here. I'd like to open up the area. So we need to make more of a feature of the rapids, integrate it more into some sight lines, give it a bit of point of interest, make some more of the water feature and everything. So just sort of touch up and spruce up the area around it, and just think about the guest experience and the guest sight lines from the back of this. But you've also got this absolute gem of a find. This Terror Tomb is such a brilliant idea. So it's a Magic Cats ride that's hidden into the hill, and it's like proper hidden. So this is where you're really starting to borrow from Gardaland, in the sense that they've got a ride called Sari that everyone thinks is buried underground. It's actually not buried underground. So when you're walking towards it and you've got all the shops around you and everything, you're not actually walking on ground. You're walking on the roof of a great big building. And so this is something that I'd like to integrate here, in the sense that this ride wouldn't necessarily be buried underneath the ground. It would be a building, and I think I would like to do something with the idea of having it as like a plaza effect, leveling off the level of the roof, making it all consistent. And then what that does mean though is that your screaming swing ride that you've got here would be too heavy to be putting on top of that building. So that's one of the design principles we're going to need to look into is like, when you're adding the realism, could that building support that ride? Probably not, so we'd probably look at moving it. You've also got a couple of guest access issues here as well, so like your disabled guests and everything couldn't get up to this ride, and so we just need to have a look at how we're going to achieve that and how we're going to better integrate it into the landscape itself and just make it fit. I'd like to do some work to the station for the coaster. So you've also need a maintenance area in here. You've got an awesome pre-show area of the station that I'd love to be able to do some work to. I'm not going to change it. You've done a really, really good job to make it like this 4D experience with all your smoke effects and steam and everything. Looks awesome. But I'd like to open up the station slightly. I'd like to potentially move the queue. At the moment it burrows through the actual hill. I think I'd like to move that to the side here and make more of a feature of this waterfront and sort of merging the queue and the exit path together. So in terms of the actual build itself, we're okay to use TMTK items. They're absolutely fine. The park loaded with them, so we're good to go there. But we're not going to be using Ghostbusters DLC. We're not going to be using the Universal DLCs either. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about for this first update. So just like all of the other videos, this is going to be done as an update type of video where I build some, update you, talk you through what I've done, build some more, and then eventually we do a before and after reveal as well. So with that in mind, let's talk no more, let's get on with the build, and here is your first update. Alright, so here we are with the first update, and as you can see there's quite a lot that's changed, but at the same time not much has changed. It's a bit of a weird one. And so the first layer of realism that you're adding into a park is always about the functionality of the facilities that you're placing down. Are those facilities in place? Can you get to them? Do they do what they need to do? And this is where you start to trade off realism and Planet Coaster playable as well. And so Rapids rides work very differently to roller coasters. With roller coasters, you typically have a station, you have a maintenance area, you fence off the whole area, job done, happy days, away you go. With Rapids, they work very, very differently. They need water facility treatments, they need electricity substations, they need fire exit points, emergency exit points, lifeguard points, and all of those kinds of things that come into like a water ride. And also with a Rapids ride, you tend to find that they will, like this one does, they will always meander downhill to a lowest point and they will return to the highest point in time for the station. Well, that means all of your water that's down here has to get up somehow. And so what you tend to find is that you have a pool of water that's sort of at the highest point, and that will then feed into where the station area is. It floods through the station area and then down to the trough. And so I've started to build that into this build in the sense that there's water that's going to be sitting at the bottom here. It will get pumped up into this second lake that I've now created and I've raised the water level of. That water level and that water in there would then be pumped into the station. The station then pumps the water down the trough, but you also then have this massive reservoir that would be used to store all of that water when the Rapids ride isn't running. And that's the other thing you have to consider. Where's your water in your Rapids ride going to go when the park is closed? You need some kind of reservoir that's available for that to come into place, and that is here. And so what I've also started to do is I've started to bring all of the concrete to the end of the trough and making it look like it's a concrete trough on a very artificial lake. And then you make it themed and decorate it around your temple area that you actually want it to be. And you start to sort of look at guest sightlines and whether you can then make a feature of that water later on. And this is what I'm starting to do here with the walling and the broken brick and everything. And I'm also doing that along this area too. In the sense that I've got this split level, and I'm going to be decorating all of this with extra stuff as we go along. So I'm already starting now to think of guest sightlines and guest interaction with that ride, even though I've stripped a lot of the ride out. Now the other thing that I've done is I've taken away the terrain. So typically when you're theming a ride like this in real life, you wouldn't use terrain to hide a ride. You would use buildings, big, massive buildings, and then you would obscure the sightline of those buildings from the guest to make them believe that they're in an area. So typically you'd be thinking like paper mache rocks and stuff. So that's what I'm starting to do here, is I've removed the terrain where it was, and I've started to do that process of putting the concrete down to make it a believable area again. And I've started to build buildings where you've got your concrete building here, but where the ride is interacting, it's then that themed wall that you have instead. And I kind of touch on this in the top tips video that I did, and saying that you don't necessarily have to build a whole haunted house if the guests are only ever going to see the front. You just build the front and hide the warehouse behind it, because the guests would never see that warehouse. And that's kind of the principle that we're going for here. You as the player would see it looking down, but the actual guest themselves on the actual ride, they would only ever see the theming that you provide them with. And you kind of see that here, in the sense of you've got this meandering bit at the end, and it's hiding as much as it possibly can. And then you've got this area here, so you've got your maintenance and facilities area that I've now placed. And this is the ideal location, especially when you're dealing with this idea of having massive pumps that are taking water from the bottom here, pumping it all the way up into a reservoir at the top. You're going to need some kind of real beefy equipment to do that. So this is where this would be situated, but because you need beefy equipment, and it's going to be quite disruptive to your theme if it's just on show, it's not like a roller coaster maintenance shed where you can go, hey, it's a shed. These are big pieces of kit. So all I'm doing here is I'm obscuring it. So I know I'm already lower down, and I don't know that behind this massive wall of water that's distracting me, there's all of this equipment that's pumping water around the ride, and it just becomes a massive machine plant as opposed to this magical ride. So I'm obscuring the view of the guest of all of this stuff by using things like vegetation and walls and waterfalls and distraction techniques. But you still have the access to the main area. So that's sort of like the big changes that are happening around the Rapids ride. I haven't touched the track of the roller coaster, but I'm starting the process of stripping out the actual station of the roller coaster and bringing it out and around. So we would eventually have like a ride photo booth here, and it looks out onto the actual artificial lake, and then it would come around this way. This would be a temple area, undercover. Think of like undercover with pillars and everything along here, and then that would come underneath the lift hill and into the station. I started the work on the Terror Tomb as well. So the principle that we said in the very first part of this video, that this would be sitting on top of a building. So this essentially would be the building's roof. And as a result of it being on a building, you couldn't put a ride as heavy as the Screaming Swing in. So I've moved the Screaming Swing over. It's still higher than the whole area, so you're still getting the height thing, but it's not as high, and there's a couple of reasons for that. You still need disabled access, so you have to consider your angles of your paths and how steep they're going to be in order to be able to allow access. And so you wouldn't want to go any steeper than this. And I mean, this even now is probably still too steep. But again, we're dealing with Planet Coaster trade-off and Realism trade-off, so kind of let it slip. So yeah, so these are the kinds of principles that I'm dealing with in this, in the sense that this is a building, it's too heavy, the ride would be too heavy to house it, so I've pushed it over so it's on solid ground, and then you would have this area that would be a building, or that would have like all of your facilities, your amenities, and just going to fight with the autosave, the facilities and the amenities and everything that you would have there, very similar to how iCorsari does it at Gardaland. And then I've just started to repurpose all of the pathing and everything here. I've condensed it all into one area, so that the next thing I can do then is repurpose this area and make it a bit more ready to go over to the sci-fi area. So like I say, there's a lot that's changed, but not a lot that's changed at the same time. And so at the moment, this is just the layer of facilities functionality. Can you get to where you need to go? Can you have escape points? Have you got the maintenance places already in place, ready for the detailing later on? So that's it for this update anyway. That's quite a long update, but I just wanted to talk you through the principles that sit behind the decisions that I've made, particularly when it comes to Rapids rides. There's a lot of facilities management that comes into a Rapids ride, more so than a roller coaster. So anyway, so enough of me talking. Let's go straight to the next update. Alright, so this is about 6 hours later, and you can see that the area has had a bit of a tidy up. It's looking a bit more pulled together, and so I've carried on with the idea of the facilities functionality areas, and making sure that everything is now where it should be. And so I've done a lot of work on the pools around this area. So everything's now got this retaining wall around it, and this is what you would find on a real rapids. It would be like concrete channels, and then those concrete channels would then be decorated in your theme of choice. So I've put the broken wall all around the top just to give it that impression of the concreteness. I've also started to lay down the actual flooring of the pools as well, so they would typically just be concrete. And I've also added this idea of the retaining wall as well, the brick wall that you find in the spooky pack. And it looks really good when you do it that way. I need to sort out the water effects and stuff. I need to give them pipes, and I need to make them have actual plumbing. But what I've started to now do in this area and over here is this idea of the movement of the water, where it would start at the highest point, flow through the station, and then flow down through the channels and it'd end up at the bottom, and then it has to be transferred back to the top again. So what we were talking about in the first update, really. And now, because we're doing that little bit of a trade-off between real life, where you would tend to find the lift hill right near the station, and Planet Coaster, where if you did that, you wouldn't have enough rafts on the track. We're sort of having to imagine with this that the water is being pumped to the highest point here, and it's flowing through this way, and it would come back out into this sort of area. And so I've widened these channels, and as I said before, I wanted this to be almost like the reservoir where the water would go when all of these rapids are empty. Now, in reality, it'd probably find the lowest point, and that would most likely actually be down here. And so I'm struggling with that a little bit. I'm struggling with that concept of actually should the pool be down here, but I think this kind of works. I think it's got a precedent that there are other rapids out there that do that kind of thing. And so I've carried on as well the idea of the building. So this is now much more fleshed out as an actual building. So if you can imagine, this has got a roof. This has now been hollowed out completely, ready for its decoration, ready for its theming and stuff. And it crosses over now quite seamlessly, and it's also now got these rapid walls. So I've put the rapid walls together to be, again, as real as possible. They're fed by, they're not underneath here, but don't tell anyone. They're fed by pipes along the top, and it sort of splashes out the top. And if you imagine now that it's flowing over the side, and this is like an indoor waterfall area that you would have, with the coaster then going over the top of the roof, so you would never actually know that these two even interact with each other. Toyed with the idea of bringing the track down and making it interact with the rapids slightly, a little bit like the Runaway Mine Train does with the rapids at Alton Towers, but it just didn't work out. The track just didn't sort of fit properly, so I've decided to keep it as it is. And I've extended the building out here slightly. Started to put some of the rock work in. I wanted to make sure that this update showed you an almost finished pooling off area where I've done the concrete channeling across most of the rapids, and I've then started to put the rock work where I want it to be, and also the fence work where sightlines need to be blocked from the guests. So like this, for example, is what's going to be the ride photo shop, and you want the fence across here just to block the view. Likewise with this one, it blocks the view of the unsightly channels that we've got here, like the pumps that are dragging the water up. And I've started the work here as well. I've put the emergency steps in, so now if you're evacuated from this bottom part, you can now walk up and you can access the backstage area, and eventually it will go out onto the road. And then the idea of this then is that all of the water treatment plants are sort of over here. Again, in reality, I think these would be more here, because you would need sort of central access to the pool area to be able to pump it out, quickly pump it out and pump it back in again. But I've just kept this as it is, just imagining that this pool would actually be attached to these treatment plants along this sort of trajectory. It would go under. Again, we sort of have to forsake some of that realism for what's playable in Planet Coaster. There's no point trying to waste our time putting it all in here when this sort of fits a little bit better. So this is now starting to come together. This is now starting to have its detailing done, like its first level of detailing. So it's got an access point, it's got a bit of a veranda, it's got the tanks now in place. I just need to put the pipes and whatever in just to make it look a bit more real. And these, like the channels, are actually looking really good. They are just the temple pieces laying down on there on their sides, and just then lined off. And I think it just finishes it off. It just makes it look really clean. And this then just is going to have all of its theming added, so there's going to be temple pieces and whatever that's all along here. I started the work again down this side, so this again is going to be the ride photo area. We're going to have some gift shops along here. This is going to be a bit of like a lookout. I wanted to make a bit of a feature of this water, even though it's not a massive body of water. I still thought it was important that we did that. I've also dug out the hill slightly, so I've managed to put the queue line in and the exit path. So at least now I know how this is going to all come together. I just need to really decorate this and really start to sort out how this is going to be. I've kind of neglected all of these areas based on doing the rapids, and then also the Magic Cats ride as well. Just to refresh you from the first update, the idea of this is that it's a building, and that this plaza area is sitting on top of a building next door to the Screaming Swing ride, and so I've just started to plan out where I want some things and where I want shops and stuff to happen. And the idea is this whole Ikorsari thing where you exit the ride and you go up all of the stairs into a shop, and then you come out into a plaza, and then you walk down. That's kind of the feel that we're going for here, but at the moment this is a real mess. I've proper made a mess of this, and so I just need to tidy this up. I need to sort of really shore up everything, make it really more temple-y. I'm sure you're probably looking at this phone thinking, oh, what have you done? Trust me, it's going to work out. It's going to work out fine, I promise. So that's it for this update. I'm going to carry on working, and I will see you for the next one. Alright, so we've got quite a big update for you on this one. So this is probably the penultimate update before everything is finished. And the first couple of updates have all been dealing with the idea of the area functionality and how it's pulling together and making sure that you've got all of the facilities that you need, including all of the access points and everything. But never at any point have we really started to talk about the theme park way of pulling things together. And that's by looking at the guest experience and the monetization of the area. And so that's what I've done in this update. I've sort of merged the two together. Because this is a destination area, you don't really have much to contend with when it comes to guest experience and monetization. It's an area that people go to, they don't pass through it. So your opportunities for truly milking as much money out of an area as you can are kind of limited, because you're only going to be able to get the people that have chosen to come to this area. So you sort of have to be quite clever with how you're doing it. And so what I've started to do in this one is this area here down the bottom is almost like prime area. This is your throughfare. This is your thoroughfare. This is where people are going to walk through, because they're going to be coming down this path and they're going to be either turning left to go down to the new sci-fi area. So I've started this process of bringing the people around, or they're going to carry straight on and go into the rapids area. And so this area here is where you're truly going to get your monetization opportunities. So I've put a gift shop here, and I've also put some food stalls and some game stalls and everything along the right hand side, so you can catch as many people as you possibly can walking through. Now the reason that I've put it this side of the path and not the other side of the path where the Roctopus ride is because every single person that's coming to this area and passing the area has to walk past the gift shop, whereas if you've got it the other side, and they have to walk past the actual doors of the gift shop, whereas if you put it the other side or put the path down this way, people can quite easily just cut through and they can just miss the shop completely. So there's just that little bit of creating an opportunity. You might not get sales out of that opportunity, but it's about creating those opportunities. And so that's what I've done. That's what I've done here. I've also started the process of the landscaping and the guest experience of the area as well. So the pulling together the theme, pulling together everything that's needed. So I've started the garden work and where I want some soil and where I want the land to be level, even though it might not be underneath. Just to create, because this is quite a terrain heavy landscape. It's quite hilly. It's quite rough and rugged around the edges, so you kind of need a bit of an area where the surface is flat, and this is what I'm starting to create here when it comes to these gardens. So even though we've got these levels and we're truly drawing out those levels and those sight lines, we've still got the flat ground to go with. I'm also starting to think about what the guests actually see. So like from down here you can see the lift hill of the roller coaster. You can see the fence that's associated with the backstage area of the rapids, and obviously when we put the vegetation and stuff in you won't be able to see it, but I'm starting to block off that view. We've also got the on-ride Photoshop that's coming together here, and the station that's coming together here. I've done no other work with the Rapids area. That's as we left it in the previous update. I started work on the station over here, and I've decided to keep it. So the original station is this here. It's got the pyramid, and I toyed with this for a couple of occasions. Like there's a couple of versions that I did, and I've decided to keep this site level flat. Again, because it's a very terrainy type of area, you kind of want to toy with that and play with that. So I'm going to keep this on one level, taller than a guest, but not too tall. So the coaster's going to come out at the top here, and then I'm just going to decorate along the top here. And that's what I've started to do. I started to create this sort of like plaza-y, mini plaza area, just so that guests can congregate, and they have to pass gift shops, and this is going to be a key ride of the area, right? So you're going to want to create more opportunities for stuff. And again, there's a second ride Photoshop. Toyed with the idea of having one central ride Photoshop sort of here that services both the Rapids and the roller coaster, but no, it felt like these areas needed individual shops, purely because it breaks up the monotony of the area slightly. It gives a bit of sort of, makes it nice and neat. And then I've done a load of work over here as well. So in this particular episode, I'm not going to touch the Magic Cats ride or what's going to happen underneath here. That's down to Tom to finish when he wants to. But what I am going to do is concentrate on the sight lines and how the terrain is going to interact with it. So this is how it's looking now. And this is looking much better. Again, it's playing with the terrain quite nicely. You've got this ramp that goes up all of this way, and you've got the stairs that go up that way. So you've got a bit of sightline variation, and then the temple itself is starting to come together quite nicely. So that's pretty much it for this update. I wanted to keep this one really short, just to show you the progress, because the next update we're going to have, it should all be finished. So here we go. Alright, so we're done. It's time for some before and after shots, and I think he's ready for them. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. So the area is now taking on a life of its own. It's all done, it's all finished, it's all detailed. There's quite a lot of change that's happened between the last update and this update, and I kind of wish I'd done a midpoint update so I could show you what was changing. But most of it is all of the safety featured, most of it is all the backstage and the cluttering type of stuff that we did in episode 1. So you've kind of already seen that already, and it's the other updates have been quite long, haven't they? So I kind of just wanted to batch it all together and just be done with it. But either way, here we are in our actual ride area, or in our new Rapids area, and it looks so good. It's come together so well. Loving all of this awning, and it's just starting to look so good. So let's do a tour, shall we? Let's have a look. Let's have a look around. So I started to do a lot of the ride touching up around the outside, and I had to stop myself. I had to remember that the Rapids ride is the star of the show. This is what we came to do. This is what we were reeling up. I just needed to touch up the areas to make it more believable and real. But the actual rides themselves, they would be episodes in their own right. So I've left those, and I've left elements of it for Tom, the original creator, to actually come along and finish the job and sort of take up where I've left off. So I didn't want to get too deep into the area. I just want to make the area believable, and I think I've achieved that. I think that's done. The area is now completely wide open. It's now this plaza area. It looks a lot airier, a lot brighter. It's not so claustrophobic, and we've achieved that by sort of opening up 3 almost plaza areas. So you've got the top one up by the Rapids ride, you've got this top one by the Screaming Swing, and then we've now leveled off all of the queue line and the exit and everything for the roller coaster and the Magic Hats ride here. So and it sort of opens up quite nicely, and the guest sightline is now drawn in many different ways. It's now a varying different sightline where you've got lots to look at, lots to see, and you've got lots to explore. And the Screaming Swing ride itself is also now lovely, in a lovely position. I really like how this is now sitting. Before it would have been a bit too high, but now it's sort of sitting on the sightline. I've just used some of this vegetation and rock work and everything just to create a bit of depth, so it looks higher than it actually is. But in order for this ride to be accessible, disabled guests and everything, it needed to be lower, because you couldn't have got a ramp up there. So we've got the ramp on the left hand side that goes all the way up, and you can access it here. And remembering as well back to the very original point of the episode, this Magic Cats ride that we've got is in a building. So it's the Icosari from Gardaland theory of they've taken off out the whole of the side of the hill, and they've just put a building into that hill, and then the ride is within that building, so you can't put anything heavy on top of that building. So you couldn't put a ride, you couldn't put anything like especially the Screaming Swing. It's got a lot of forces and movement that it would need, and so as a result, you leave it as queue line. You leave it as shops and sort of like the building-y type stuff. But with that in mind, you then couldn't go too high either. So that's why all of the buildings in this area are now sort of one level. They were one story. The autosave, by the way, is going to take quite a while because I've added quite a lot to the park. So I'll just carry on talking whilst it's doing its thing. Yeah, so you've got this element of only having one story high buildings, and that's only because the sightline of the park lends itself to that as well, right? So you don't want to be diminishing your sightline too much. And so taking a look then around the actual area itself, so from the entrance you sort of come in, and I did originally have this as a solid wall, but when you look up from the guest sightline perspective, it's bottlenecked. It created this real like squeeze of space. So all I've done is I've just opened up one side of the gift shop wall, and you can now look right in, and you remembering that we can go left here and go down to the sci-fi area that's under construction, so people are going to be passing through this area to get there, so you don't want this bottlenecking here. And so I've just worked on the inside, so it's now just got some stuff. I haven't put too much depth in, like I see creators do absolutely beautiful gift shops. I've just put stuff in just to make it represent a gift shop. You know what it is. It's a gift shop. There's some shelves. There's some stuff on the shelves. There's things that you can buy. It's what it is. It was the outside design I wanted to nail, and I love this whole design. These are just the wall pieces that are turned onto their side and then facing each other. You just create this lovely little gap effect. And then these are just sunk into the pillars and everything. It looks really great. Like I love how it's turned out. Like it's open. It's a very open shop, so it creates that illusion of space straight away. And then over here as well, we've just got the game stalls and the food stalls that I wanted to put in. I've used a similar technique here with the brickwork. These are just the other trims that you get. The triangular trims. You just turn them back to front, and you end up with this beautiful rock work that you get. And so I wanted to keep this very simple. Like I say, this isn't the star of the show. This is just here for the sake of being here. But then we've also got the curbing along here with the vegetation, just creating that sightline difference. It's obscuring as much as you can of the Rapids ride. It's supposed to be a jungle, so you're supposed to be walking through the middle of jungle, and the jungles are not sparse. And so I've also just moved the Rocktopus up in terrain height, so you've just got that terrain variation, and then just used the foliage around it to try and hide the backstage area of the Rapids ride. So this I like now as well. This has come to life quite nicely. We've got the cow pen queue in the back. You've got the ride sat there, and then this fountain is, as you already know, hiding a path anomaly. So it just creates the illusion that this is one big path, but it's actually not. It's this triangle in here. Put some facilities along here, some benches, picnic benches and everything, so you can just sit underneath the dappled shade. And this is quite a thing actually they do at Gardaland. You have quite a lot of treed areas, almost like foresty areas, where you've got benches and everything. It gets quite hot. And then we open up into our plaza area. So we've already been here, we've already seen this, but you've now got so much to look at. You've got the roller coaster, you've got the area up here, you've got your Temple Guardian queue line, your Magic Hat queue line, you've got the Screaming Swing. There's loads of stuff going on. So if we go up into the Rapids area, so this is now the entrance. This has turned out so well. These along here, it's just like a cloth awning, but they're the drapes from the Western theme set. You just colour them and all the same colour, and you just create this amazing cloth effect. And then all I've done is I've just used the poles just to make them into some kind of like frame, and then just spam copied them across. And then when I did this, I also thought actually I could use this on the station, and I wanted then to keep the station open. I didn't want to enclose it. It's not very often you get to see a decent rapids ride with an open station. They're normally either enclosed or whatever, especially the ones I've been on anyway. So I just wanted to get that feeling of openness, and it would be a warm climate ride, so I'm kind of thinking that you wouldn't want to be enclosed in it. And then the photo shop and the gift shop. I think if I'm honest, I've probably overdone the gift opportunities, the monetization areas within the park or within this area, but it's fine. Whatever. I just put our gift clutter just on the outside, just to make it believable. And then I've just done the insides as well. I've not decorated this out completely. Like I said, I've seen people that do just amazing work with this sort of stuff. I just wanted to keep this nice and simple, representative of what it's meant to be. And there are no women archaeologists, so I'm afraid we don't have much diversity when it comes to our staff. They're all going to be men, but I did look for a and I like how the wording sort of sits here. I've never considered putting the wording down there before, but I think it looks really, really good. So the actual rapids ride itself. So I've done some work on this area here. I've just put some back of house clutter. There would be CCTV. You would have some kind of camera mechanism looking around the park, but I've not put it in here because the screens that we use are far too big. So I've just sort of had to make a sacrifice there. I've had to say no, I'm not going to do it. But in terms of the actual ride itself, I've now themed all along here, so I've kept the rapids theming really, really loose. I didn't want to go OTT with the temple theming. It felt like this kind of park would have a medium style budget, and they're going to spend most of their money on the actual concreting the actual area itself rather than the theme. So this is like very sparse along here. And ultimately as well, because you're going through a jungle, it's supposed to be all about the vegetation, right? You're supposed to be in amongst all of the trees and everything. So that's kind of the feeling that I was going for. You spend more of your money on your foliage than you would on all of your concrete and stuff. So you come around the first bend and you come into this area, and you've got this lovely little step wall down, and I really like how everything is now lined. It now feels like it's a concrete channel, and it's been leveled off, and you're also immersed as well. So like I can look down, I can look down into the pool, or I can look up, but I can't really see the rapids right up from above because of the sight line. And I've continued that theme throughout this whole ride, and I've made sure that I've kept an element of the realism along here. So all of the water jets are fed by a pipe, and then that pipe would technically be led into this one here, and then that goes into the pool. So it's got that element of believability that it's real. And so this area here is just an archway that I've created, nothing particularly special. And then you've just got the jetways and the waterfall, and then this dude just does what he needs to do as you go past. They're just completely random, like there's no real rhyme or reason to it. And then you've got the maintenance pool here. So again, you can't really see it from this side, but it's there. And then you come into the actual temple. So this originally was all underground, and like I said in the first one, you tend to not use terrain to hide your rides in real life. You tend to have buildings, and so that's what I wanted to do here. I wanted to turn this into a building rather than terrain, and now that kind of means that you have to trade off this area here. This bit did it really well, going through the hills and everything, so I don't know whether that's something that you'd want to put some kind of fake rock work on the top. But this building is now as it should be. It's that medium budget element again. This is the temple that you're trying to achieve, but it doesn't have much detail. But it's got enough detail to be temple believable. You've got your fire exit, your exit point here, in case there's an emergency, and then you come into the waterfalls. And the waterfalls have got the pipes and everything in the back, and it's like a concrete back as well. So it's fed. It's a fed water source even in the game. I've kept that element really going, and I've kept this bit clear purely because this kind of medium ride attention distraction thing comes into play. So your attention is going to be more along this waterfall area and what's coming rather than what you put here. So you could put something elaborate here and it's all sorts of animatronic and it's all sorts of everything going on, but you're still only going to be paying attention to the fact you're about to get absolutely soaking wet. So there's no point in having anything here. And in real life parks, when I've looked at rapids, POVs and everything, you tend to find this. You tend to find blank space like this, and it would either be lit up or you'd have very little going on. So I've kept that true here. And then we just come through. This is the jungle part. This is where we start to really use the foliage, and then we come past. Whoops! We just come past this temporary type setup that I've done. It doesn't really again serve much of a purpose. It's just there. It's just temporary ruins really. And then we come through this area, and this fence just obscures your view of the ride from above because you're now quite a bit lower. It's quite a drop that appears here, but it's just that believability. And then you come back into the temple, get sprayed by your snake, and then you come down through here. Now I wanted to keep this back bit intentionally sparse and intentionally bare. It feels like Park would have wanted to make most of the effort of what the guest actually sees, and this is at the back of the building and it's at the end of that building section. So it's like, why would they make the effort just to do all of that bit? Because you've then got the finale, so they would have spent the money here, and this is just an amazing little run through. The autosave now kicks in right at the wrong moment. So you've just got this amazing little run through, and the foliage that I've put on the top here now really truly hides and immerses you in that experience of being in a jungle. So you've just got this sightline obscurity, and there's loads of stuff that's going on at the top here that you now can't see because the foliage is in the way. And that's what I sort of like. So like over here, for example, you've got this massive giant wall that's obscuring the backstage areas. And so if you have a look here, you come into a building, and here's the escape stairs that we need to put in. But now I've put these pipes, and so I changed the way that the water is circulating around the ride. So I put the pipes in all along the lift hill here, and it now comes out at the top here. So whereas the outlet would have been here, I've now moved it to be at the top of the lift hill, and that sort of makes more sense to have the tanks down here. It can draw the water from the bottom here, and then it can pump it back up through this way, and it just sort of like a bit of a tighter circulation, and then from here it comes into the station and then out. And yeah, so then you've got your backstage areas that I've now completely obscured and hidden from guest view. So you've got all of your clutter, your tanks, your generators, your bins, your lorries, all sorts of stuff that's going on here. Like, it's really an ugly backstage area, but it's really well hidden. You'd never know that it was there. You can see it from the coaster, but don't tell anyone. And then this area I've kept intentionally blank as well. This would be where all of your pipelines and your pipe work and everything would be. So you'd need some kind of easy access in case anything went wrong. So you could just dig this up and remove it and take it away and stuff. So that's what I've done with this area, and I really like how it's turned out. I like how the concrete is now flush with the channel. It now looks like it's just a big concrete pad, and I like how the vegetation and everything is starting to create that jungle effect along here, and how the pool up here is it's very clean. It's very clean lines, very clean looking. And then in terms of the rest of the areas, so the roller coaster, as promised, I put the maintenance area in. I've just done a little bit of cluttering and a little bit of detailing and whatever. Most of the maintenance of this roller coaster would actually take place in the shed, unlike the last one we did where they didn't have a lot of room. A lot of it's done on the side of the transfer track. With this one, they've actually got a shed for that, so you don't need as much detailing in this area. Plus, as I said at the very beginning of this update, I needed to know when to stop. I was going too far, and so I just sort of made this as it should be. Like you can see, this bit needs work, it needs integrating, but this would all come with whatever's going to come in the development of the monorail station, because you need access points and everything. And then I've just done the ride Photoshop here. So again, I've just kitted it out with photos and just tagged, just to make it a believable area. And then you just walk along the waterfront past the temple. And again, the queue line for Temple Guardian I've not really done much with in terms of theming. Tom, this is going to be for you when you get the park back, as to how you want this to look. I've just given you the bare bones of this, and you can fill it out and kit it out however you see fit. Obviously, it's your coaster, it's your vision, so I've just given you the starter for 10, if you like. Likewise with the Magic Hats ride, I've done the work to the inline queue, inside queue, and I've also leveled the area out, so it's now okay. But like I say, you'd need to just kit out this area with how you want it, and you'd also just need to finish off this area as well. So I've just put some fake walls, and you can see there's lots of clipping and there's lots of stuff that needs tidying up. And then up on the plaza area at the top here, I really like this effect. I just randomly pulled together some of the this is the mouth, I think it is, of the statue, just turned up on its side and then just made into like this hatching, and it looks really good. Like, just looks awesome. And from the guest look as well, it looks complete when you couple it with the bamboo. And then you've just got Screaming Swing. Again, it's got that slight height variation, just to create that different sight line, but not a lot. It's noticeable. It's noticeable, but not drastic. Noticeable. Whoops. Weird camera angles. Yeah, and then this plaza area is just a nice quiet little plaza area. It looks down onto the rapids area, and it's just a way of us splitting out where the guests are. And there was originally a plaza area that had been put into this park to start with, so I just wanted to make sure that was maintained. And so that's pretty much everything. That's the tour of the area. So I really hope you've enjoyed this one. I really hope that you like it, and I hope that you're going to want more for an episode 3. This was definitely a big one. This was a big project to do. This took a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of times when I thought, oh, I just can't do this. This is too big, bit enough more than I can chew. But I'm glad it's at the end. I'm glad it's here. So if you have liked it, or if you hate it, or whatever, then tell me down below in the comments. I always love talking to you guys anyway. Or you can leave a like. And if you want to know when episode 3 comes out, then you know what to do. Subscribe button, ring on the bell, and all of that. And then you'll get notified when the episode is. And if you want to submit your work for future episodes, then details of that are in the description as well. But otherwise, until we speak again, absolutely look after yourselves, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.